What's going on, you guys? Today we're going to walk through the exact process map that we used to take an 8-figure pet food brand to generate $7.5 million in email revenue in just 16 months, generating a net new $1.3 million of net new revenue versus the trailing 16 months period over period for this brand. In this video, we're going to go through the exact step-by-step process, break down each step, and chunk them so you can easily digest the information, so you could also use this for your brand. If you have any questions or want to go even deeper, feel free to drop them in the comments. Happy to have a discussion down there. But let's just jump into this process. This is going to be really useful for brands who are small or still growing but need a general roadmap to follow, or even brands that are currently at 7 figures and looking to go to 8. Having this general roadmap will give you something to follow, whether you're a solo founder, whether you have a small team, or whether you have a team of people working in each department. You'll be able to follow this process step by step to gain new insights into how to grow retention. So let's jump into it without further ado. So you can see 7.5 million in email revenue in just 16 months. That's amazing, but this brand was already doing 8 figures total revenue. What impressed us more was a 17% growth in email revenue versus those trailing 16 months before we started. And for a brand that's already doing 8 figures, it was a huge win. We want to see that small compounded growth year over year over year, and we're able to help them achieve that. So let's dive into covering high level the 3 different chapters of this process map. 1 is foundation, 2 is revenue, and 3 is optimization. Don't skip any of these steps. Doesn't matter where you are, because if you miss any of these steps, you can have to go back. You can waste your time. Tackling these one at a time will make sure that your foundation is set up properly, make sure that you can generate revenue, and make sure that you can make the optimizations needed to go through, find areas of opportunity, be able to scale automations both vertically and horizontally. This will give you the exact roadmap that you need. So let's start with foundation, and let's go into developing an effective email strategy. This one sounds pretty obvious, but you want to make sure that you don't just rest on your laurels. You want to make sure that you don't just stick to what you've always done. If you're looking to improve retention and email, SMS, mobile app in 2025, you need to make sure that you're revisiting, especially if you're not where you want to be. The first step is understanding your audience. Some brands have different segments of their audience, whether that be a brand that targets both men and women for the same thing, or has products for both men and women, whether it's the same type of product, an activewear, a supplement. Knowing when to speak to these different audiences is crucial, in understanding what they care about. You can do this through surveys, you can do this through just audience insights, you can do this through a few different ways, but understanding your audience is going to be crucial here. Knowing who you're talking to, what their desires are, will help you create email hooks, email angles to help to convert and move people through that funnel from non-purchaser, first time, repeat, and then loyal customer who purchased 3 times or more. Next is going to be knowing your numbers. So this isn't just knowing your internal numbers. This is also knowing all of your numbers, right? It's knowing what your margins are on your products, understanding contribution margin, understanding which products, being able to see out with a platform like Triple Whale or Store Hero, some of these platforms that provide some deeper insights, understanding this product generates 20% more contribution margin than other products. Even though it doesn't sell the most, we may want to focus on this single product in channels where we can generate the most profit. So knowing your numbers in terms of internal margins, contribution margin, but also knowing your numbers in terms of what you're looking to spend. If you're looking to invest into an email agency, understanding what you're willing to invest into that brand and still, into that agency and still stay profitable is absolutely essential. Knowing your numbers just all around, because then with that you can give your team all the data they need to understand what offers can we do profitably. Understanding what's the scope going to look like for the team. Providing clarity is key to any relationship, and just making sure that everything is laid out and there's a clear plan of attack, and that starts with knowing your numbers. The last part of developing a really effective email strategy is setting goals. So understanding what your goals are going to be. Sticking to usually high level, sticking to revenue is going to be the best. Sticking to things like list growth for goals for a channel is not that effective, because you can do a lot of things that increase your total list size but don't help in bringing in high value people into your list that are going to actually convert. You can do a free plus shipping offer, grow your list 200% period over period, but if the number of people who convert don't increase, it's all for nil. So with setting goals, sticking to some of the highest leverage stuff, and some of the goals that will have the highest effect on the next level up, which is not just email or SMS as a channel, it's retention in general. It's from there, it's everything that has to do with retaining your customer base. Then beyond that, it goes into what's going to affect the business. Next is going to be creating a strong deliverability infrastructure to maximize inbox placement. And that means both making sure that you don't land in spam, and also making sure that as much as possible you're landing in the primary tab. Both of these things are somewhat of a black box. There's no playbook on exactly how to do it. There are people who say do these 3 things and it still won't work. There's no exact playbook. There are a few things that you can do to maximize your potential for landing in the inbox, let alone primary specifically. So inside of maximizing your deliverability infrastructure, there's a few key things. Some are easier than others. Installing your authentication records. At this point, this is just kind of table stakes. If you're not doing this, you're behind the curve. Making sure that you have DKIM, SPF, and DMARC installed. If you're not doing this, do it tomorrow. This is absolutely essential. This is not becoming something that you can choose to do, or icing on the cake. This is becoming something that you absolutely positively have to do to make sure that you make it to the inbox. Next is going to be sending sources. We use a platform called EasyDMark, and what you can do inside of EasyDMark is see, are there sending sources sending on behalf of your domain that are not validated. We're seeing a lot of the domains that we run through and the clients that we run through EasyDMark. There are 2 issues. One, the most important, you're being spoofed or phished. Most brands right now don't realize that their domain is currently being spoofed or phished. People think it's something that can't happen to them, or they think that it's a random thing that only happens to bigger brands or certain people. It's happening to, 80% of the people that we're running through EasyDMark right now have some of that going on. There are certain sending sources that you can go in. The EasyDMark team or an email agency like us can go in and tell you, hey, these are known phishing sources. We can take the appropriate actions, like moving our DMARC policy to the appropriate policy, none, quarantine, reject, to make sure that those aren't getting through to customers or profiles or anyone on your list. And downstream from that, making sure that one really common one that we're seeing is Recharge. So if you're using Recharge, unless you've reached out to Recharge, and they actually might have just started doing this. I got an email from them last week, so they might have just started doing this. Unless you authenticate your email authenticate your domain, with these platforms. Fabricator, inventory management platform is another one. Gorgeous, another really popular one that you have to go through and authenticate if you haven't already. A lot of these platforms that are communicating with people on your behalf need to also be authenticated, meaning yes, your root domain also needs to have these installed, DMARC, DKIM, SPF, all the authentication records, but every platform that sends on your behalf also needs to be aligned across the board with these authentication records to make sure that all of these sending sources are being marked as valid. We're seeing a lot of legitimate sources like Gorgeous, like Recharge, like SendGrid being marked as not valid, and some of the emails not going through. Now, what happens when this takes place is if there are too many emails that are not going through or going to spam because they're not authenticated, if there's a large volume of these, it can start to affect other emails that are coming out from your domain. So this is really crucial that we fix this and make sure that it's as optimized as possible. So that way, computer screen just turned off, to make sure that you are having the best chance at deliverability possible to make sure that these ESPs aren't reading of all these thousands of microsignals that Gmail and Yahoo look at when considering where to place your emails, making sure that this isn't one of them. So simple, not easy. EasyDmark is a platform that we use. There are others, but EasyDmark by far has been the best we've used. Next here is a sending strategy. So kind of downstream from knowing your audience, and we'll get into a little bit around sending cadence, but a good sending strategy, understanding who you're sending to, understanding who you don't want to send to, and this is going to vary based off of your business. If your business is heavily based around gifting, you have to keep that in mind and make sure that you create some strategy where you're able to collect that information up front. Are you here for yourself or someone else? Someone that's here for another person or shopping for someone else may not be as inclined to repurchase as quickly, and they may need specific language, looking to give another gift, just high level things like that. Making sure that your sending strategy is solid, making sure you understand who you're sending to, and then making sure you understand how to send to them is really crucial. If you have any questions about this, shoot a message below in the comments. Happy to have a discussion. So making sure your sending strategy, at least you have an idea. In some cases, there is no real sending strategy. You're going to be sending to a mix between customers, non-customers, all profiles. Just making sure you understand that if you do need a specific strategy, you put one in place as soon as possible. Okay, creating a brand first content strategy that resonates. Now, this does not mean having extremely fancy designs. This does not mean having something that needs to blow people away with the aesthetics of it. That's not what this means at all. We have seen brands, Liquid Death is an amazing example of this, where they have pretty basic email templates they use and just switch out the copy, switch out the call to actions, switch out the imagery, and it isn't super fancy. It's an all black email with an image here, and they're really, really short. They don't go into too much depth, and that resonates with their brand, at least as far as we're aware. So finding something that resonates with your audience, again, going back to understanding your audience, the first step is create for your audience. Now, is your audience Gen X, Gen Z, Gen Y, baby boomers? Understanding your audience and creating for them. Each audience, each generation likes, appreciates, cares about different things. A baby boomer isn't going to care about the same things that a Gen Y would, or a Gen Alpha. So understanding who you're talking to and creating your content, and that's not just design. Understanding your going on to the next point, understanding your tone, understanding the words that you use, the phrases you use, the copy that you write, pairing the design and the copy together to create a content strategy that resonates with the audience. Again, this is not strictly about design. It can be, you can send all plain text emails. Everyday Dose does this a lot. If you look at the emails by Everyday Dose, they have almost strictly plain text emails, and they generate millions and millions and millions of dollars. So this is a strategy that works. It just comes down to understanding your audience and understanding who the audience is and what they care about. Going past tone, the next strategy is to chase the goal and chase it relentlessly. Understand that you have set these goals. They might not be super clear goals. You might not totally know what's realistic. Am I able to grow the brand 50% year over year? But at least understanding what you would like to do, and then understanding what's realistic as time goes on. As you start to see growth, set the goals that you think are possible, and see if you can, we'll get into next, which is reverse engineer those, but chase the goal relentlessly. Understand, and kind of lay out a plan for those goals, and understand what are the steps needed from these goals, and break them down into OKRs, which we'll get into at the end, breaking them down into objectives and key results, understanding, okay, we want to increase revenue by 20%. What does that look like? Well, if we look at our campaign recipients are down 30% year over year. Flow recipients are up 10% year over year. Well, first step, obviously, make up that delta, start sending more campaigns. Now, whether that's more total campaigns or more total campaigns, or less campaigns to a larger swath of the audience. Totally depends on the current strategy, totally depends on your brand, and totally depends on what you've been doing. If you're sending to larger swaths less and it's not working, pivot from there. Understanding where you currently are is going to be the best thing to understanding those goals and then how to chase those. But understanding how content plays a part and use content to chase those goals with strategy. Next is revenue. So there are two parts of revenue. And jumping into the first one, create consistent sending cadence with high impact campaign ideas. The amount that you send is totally dependent on your brand, but typically the more you send, the more you make. This is something that has a limit, but understanding that you can send a promotion email better than Black Friday, your best promotion you've done all year, to a group of 1,000 people. And if you sent that same campaign to 100,000, the revenue generated will likely be a lot different in the positive. As you send to more people, you make more. Now there's a limit where you can send too much. If let's say your campaign revenue is down 30% year over year, but your campaign recipients are up 200%, there's a delta there that you don't want to see. So there is a limit to that, but just strictly understanding that the more you send, the more you make at a cap. So you want to create a consistent sending cadence. Creating some consistency will help you understand, will help you better kind of roadmap, will help you better plan if you have a smaller team. If you have a team who's really, really big and they can get things out really fast, then that's amazing. But especially as you scale, having some consistency will be good. If you want me to take a look at your brand, put it through a sheet that we've built out internally to help understand based off the last 12 months, not considering some of the campaign data where, let's say you've been sending on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we want to exclude some of the variances. If you need help with that, shoot me a comment below and I'll reach out to you, and I'll do that 100% on me, give you the best days for open rates, click rates, and also terms of total revenue and placed orders. I can do that for you just to make sure that you understand when to send and if there is a best send time. What we see is typically there isn't a best send day or time, but understanding if there is can be really helpful. So creating this cadence, and most importantly, creating them with high impact campaign ideas. You don't want to just send out the same campaigns over and over and over. I have a video, if you're interested, I can send it over to you, around how to create 21 email campaign ideas in 6 minutes. You use ChatGPT to help you create some angles for these products, and you're able to really scale vertically the ideas that you can and the hooks that you can use for a single product. Let's say your brand is 50% this top SKU. You want to be able to position that product to your customers and to non-customers in a unique way as many times as you can without getting boring or tired or old, and creating some of those different angles are going to be key to that. There are a lot of different ways that you can position a product to consumers, and so being able to scale those vertically is really impactful. The first thing you'll do here is dive into the data and again understand what should our cadence be. Has there historically been a best send time, not just for campaigns, not just if your brand releases products once a week, that can really skew the data, but digging into data and understanding, is there a best send time and a send day, and is there a best number of campaigns based off of what we sent. What I mean by that is looking at the delta between your recipients from campaigns and also your revenue from campaigns. If your campaign recipients are down 50% and your revenue is down 50%, there's an easy delta to say that we just need to send more. But looking at that delta can help give you some insights into the cadence and also the volume of sending. So diving into data will be really helpful there. And then reverse engineer that. Whatever you find, and from the goals that you've created, you want to reverse engineer that and understand, okay, well, if we're going to send these 2 days, if our engaged list size is this, then to get to 20% up from total campaign recipients. Let's say we're down 50% and want to make up that delta 70%. Then over these, we have a scope with an agency who's doing 12 campaigns a month. We know that we're going to have to send to these many. So you start to reverse engineer it so that way you understand if we just follow this roadmap, at the end of 30 days, we'll be at where we're trying to get to. And then if you're not, we do bi-weekly analytics tracking just to see where are we in terms of our goals. And so you can either do bi-weekly tracking or looking back and pivoting for the following month. So reverse engineering is going to be absolutely crucial because we talk about this later as well, but what gets measured gets managed. Being able to understand what the goal is and then break that down and watch that and make sure, are we hitting it, are we not? If so, what's next? Next is creating a content framework. So this kind of dives into the campaign ideas and kind of goes into that scaling of angles and hooks for, let's say, your top 5 products. You can create 75 or more different angles and hooks for those 5 products that can take you out for the entire year. Between that and any new releases, any back in stocks, you can build a really, really comprehensive email sending strategy with really high producing, high impact campaign ideas if you just plan it out, map it out, cover it with the team, create a strategy. And this starts with a content framework, understanding what is our value to product or promotion ratio. Is it 2-to-1? Is it 3-to-1? Is it 10-to-1? All totally dependent on your brand and your goals, totally dependent on what you're able to invest reasonably into email marketing. But understanding and building out this general content framework and using that as somewhat of a guide to help make this process easier. Starting from zero and going, what do I send, is one of the hardest things that you'll have to do. Creating a framework and understanding what's worked. Going back to diving into data, understanding what campaign ideas have worked, understanding what campaign ideas have not worked, understanding what's working, what's not, and what's next is crucial here. Next is going to be leveraging flows to increase automated touch points and drive incremental revenue. There is so many accounts that we go into that are underutilizing automations. And there are some that we go into that are overcomplicating automations, some with these really hyper complex conditional splits that do absolutely nothing. You want to stick to some of the lowest hanging fruit to start. If your brand doesn't have an abandoned checkout flow at this point, it's an easy starting point. If your brand only has one email in the welcome flow, easy starting point. Looking at some of the lowest hanging fruit, that thinking about this in 80-20 and thinking about kind of Pareto's principle, looking at what are the smallest things that we can do to make the biggest impact, because time is really valuable. So making sure that you can prioritize tasks effectively is going to be crucial here. So low hanging fruit, tackling those first. Once you have kind of the core setup, let's say you have the core 5 setup, you have welcome, checkout, cart, post-purchase, browse abandonment. Once you have those set up and you have the core 5 set up, then looking at scaling vertically, looking into each of those flows. What we typically see with, let's say, a CPG brand typically is email 1 will produce 70 to 90% of the revenue in the welcome series. But still looking at each automation, understanding, can we improve this? Can we add to these? Let's say in your typically what we'll see with checkout, if there's 2 checkout emails with a brand that's doing, let's say, over $250,000 a month, if you have 2 emails in your abandoned checkout, typically what you'll see is the revenue will be pretty even between those 2, or a small disparity, 10, 15, 20, 30%, again, in some cases. In that case, I would say let's add another, even if we just resent the same email to people who didn't open or click, but really adding more to that. Let's say expanding it out 3 or 4, so that way there's a total of 3 or 4 emails in that single flow. Could be a great way to scale vertically. Again, if there's 1 email in the welcome series, scaling vertically, adding 3, 4, 5 emails to that welcome series. Again, I've seen people with really hyper complex 17 email welcome series, and the email number 1 will still generate 60% of the revenue. So just looking at where you can scale vertically without wasting your time. Because again, if you have 5 emails in your welcome series, email 1 is generating 80%. The last email in that series is generating $0 the last 90 days. Don't waste your time putting another email in the welcome series. Looking at where you can scale vertically. Next, in terms of automations, is scaling horizontally. There are over 17 different flow ideas that we have used and generated across accounts. If you have 5, you might be thinking, I'm not sure what else I can add. There's more to add. There's a lot of more advanced flows that you can look at, but really if you just have the core 5, looking at other flows that you can add: site abandonment, expected date of next order, birthday or anniversary flows, and there's flows that go even deeper than that, re-engagement flows. Looking at how you can scale both vertically down into the same flow, in the same automation, and then horizontally creating net new automations and adding those to your account. And next is optimizations. Creating segmentation strategy for more efficient email marketing systems. Very, very often I see people who are using consistently every single email send, engaged 180, engaged 360, engaged 120. And in reality, we've tested this across almost a dozen clients at this point, and looking at spreading your engaged segments and stacking them in single campaigns between engaged 30, 60, 90, 120, and 180. There's almost no percentage differential, almost none, between engaged 30, engaged 60, and engaged 180. They generate almost the exact same amount of revenue. Now, granted, this is with accounts that already have a really comprehensive strategy. If you are currently neglecting any emails, any profiles outside of those 30 days, that wouldn't be the case. But looking and stacking these segments, and even creating these engaged segments to make sure they're effective as possible. We've tested having only email metrics, open click. We've tried testing open click and subscribe to email in this period of time. We've tested stacking all of that with site metrics, has placed order, abandoned cart, and you need to find the right strategy for you guys. And we think we've played around with it, and some are better than others, but looking at what that's going to look like for your account and creating that segmentation strategy. We now have also moved towards creating segmentation exclusively for people who are engaged and have purchased, and people who are engaged and have not purchased. So people who we can try and look at as prospects, people who are close to the goal line, and people who have already purchased, so we can use specific language to help them convert into a repeat purchaser, and then also a loyal customer, kind of move them down that funnel. So looking at the percentage differential for your brand and understanding, should you even send outside of engaged 30 days? Is it worth it? And understanding, just the overall segmentation strategy, if you should speak to specifically non-customers more, customers more, understanding what that looks like for your brand. Next is one that isn't talked about a ton, but is true as far as we've seen. Not falling into the trap of the personalization myth. Again, we've seen automations with really, really complex conditional splits that are sending specific emails to people who have selected certain things or bought certain products, and use dynamic syntax to insert certain language, or even inside of campaigns. Someone creating a campaign using a conditional block to only show certain things to certain people, and sending the same campaign with a different hero to 5 different audiences who all have some profile property that they've selected. Most of the time it's nonsense. Most of the time they would get the same results or better if they just stuck to one campaign and let the content and the angle and the USPs of your product speak for themselves. You would generate more revenue or the same in less time. So again, unless your brand really, really, really calls for hyper personalization, unless you've seen, or again, feel free to test this, but we've just seen it time and time again. Unless your brand is built on personalization, maybe let's imagine the case of a product like Thesis, where it is there's different products. One's for focus, one's for mood, one's for unless you have something hyper specific like that, or a multivitamin that someone creates, or Prose, Prose, where they create custom shampoo conditioner bundles. Unless there's a situation like that, most of the time you don't need to worry about personalization. It's just not as powerful as people thought. You can utilize personalization, like first name, product they've bought, but it's just not as powerful as people once thought, unless your brand absolutely calls for it. And it really is built on customization, personalization. Next is to purge the list. This has been a hard one for people to digest, but most of your list is just a waste. This is something that was really hard for me to admit. I tried, creating different segments and sending to those segments to try and re-engage these people, and most of your list, 50, 60, 70% are just people who are not going to purchase now, not going to purchase soon, and potentially not going to purchase ever. So, utilizing segmentation to get these people out of most of your sends, to make sure that you're keeping good engagement metrics and creating specific flows for these people, and potentially even one-off campaigns for these people every so often, once a quarter, maybe once a month, but maybe a few times a year, to try and re-engage these people. But really, automated flows should take care of this. Win-back series, sunsetting flows, and making sure that on a consistent basis you're purging the list of these unengaged people is essential. Getting these people off your list, you are occasionally including these people in some of your sends. They're occasionally making it through some of your flows. Let's say they are engaged on site, but they don't check their email, or their email is full. You are going to continue to get bounces from those until they're suppressed. Looking at purging the list to keep it clean from people like this. Next is ongoing flow optimization processes to maximize flow revenue. Consistently looking at everything that you've built. Again, going back to our first chapter here, not resting on your laurels, understanding that this is like a baby. It requires constant attention. You want to always look at and identify, step one, identify underperformers. You always want to make sure that you are looking for areas of opportunity. That's the only way that you're going to continue to grow and scale. And having someone to help with this is, amazing when you can have someone take it off of your plate. But regardless, still taking a look and identifying these underperformers and at least noting or calling them out. So identifying underperformers is a huge part of this, and understanding where you can cut, understanding what you don't want to focus more on, figuring out what you don't think is worth scaling vertically, or what automations are worth scaling vertically, and overall just identifying where the performance is lacking. Optimizing trigger points. So this, a great example is the expected date of next order flow. This is a flow that will capture a lot of people. This is a flow that will bring a lot of people through, if not optimized properly. You want to optimize the trigger points. You want to make sure that you're optimizing to kick people out who have purchased. You want to make sure you're kicking people out who have opened 0 times if it's a longer flow. Optimizing both profile triggers and also profile triggers and flow triggers. And so, being able to optimize those trigger points. And for example, if a flow and automation like the expected date of next order flow is bringing a large volume of people, you can create triggers. You can create trigger exclusions for, let's say, has bounced email 3 times over all time. If it's a long, let's say it's a 4 email series, has bounced email 0 times since starting this flow, has bounced email less than once since starting this flow, has opened email at least once since starting this flow, that would be best to create a conditional split for, but still looking at ways that we can optimize this to figure out, is this as optimal as possible? Can we start to kick people out? Are we seeing really poor engagement metrics because unengaged people are making it through somehow? Looking at how we can optimize trigger points, both profile, looking at flow triggers, and also looking at conditional splits. Third here is to get advanced. This is going to happen once you've gone throughout this process, or if you work with an agency who has experience with building out more advanced automations, looking at how you can, again, going back to before, is there anything that you can do to optimize these automations, like excluding people out who haven't opened an email, if it's a longer automation, or adding in more advanced automations, like, for example, things that aren't in the core 5, core 7, or even in the top 10. Something that might be specific to your brand. We got a message that's not too long ago to add a flow in for that's going to tie into the brand's subscription. So creating a strategy around how to convert more people on subscription. They have a pretty advanced subscription setup. So looking at things like that might be specific to your brand, and even creating SKU specific automations that tie in, if your brand is 40, 50, 70, 80% one single hero SKU making up your total revenue, then creating an automation specifically for that to educate, to drive repurchases on the product, things like that. You can start to get a little bit more advanced. And lastly, in optimizations is data-driven optimizations that keep revenue growing month over month. There's a great saying that I love. I think I forget who says it. I think it's Drucker. But what gets measured gets managed. If you're not looking at these things, they will go to the wayside. What you prioritize gets done. So, making this a real priority to look at, check in on, and figure out where we can optimize revenue growth and keep that growth month over month by continuing to create new plans of attack, understanding what the goals are of the business, and figuring out how we can tie that into email and email growth. Typically your email agency would help with this, but if you are a solo founder, if you're a smaller team, looking at this yourself is really crucial. And the first step is auditing your current setup. We've said this again and again, not resting on your laurels, always looking at where we can improve, auditing your current setup with all the expertise we built over these 3 chapters, looking at your current setup, auditing your current setup and figuring out where the areas of opportunity are, looking at, once it's built out, this behemoth of a process of an account, looking at it from 30,000 feet and understanding where we can optimize, and auditing that setup is step 1. Step 2 is goal evaluation. So looking at your goals and looking at, have we achieved this, yes or no? This is going to help us understand what to set our goals like for the next 30, 60, 90 days, understanding and reevaluating our goals, right? Hey, we wanted 50% growth because we saw another brand who was touting 50% growth, and for us it just didn't happen, whether that was from the acquisition and trying to run ads during the election, or whether it was having your key product that was sold out for 2 months. Looking at your goals, evaluating your goals, and figuring out where, did it work, did it not, and if so, what's next. And then the last step here is creating OKRs based off of your evaluation of those goals. So looking at, based off of this process we built out, and looking at our goals and how far we've come with our goals, whether we've hit them or we haven't, creating OKRs for those that are specific to email. Again, your agency should do this process in creating these goals, but helping to understand how this larger goal that the brand has ties into email. For example, objective and key results. You can break it down and start to evaluate, hey, we want to send more. What does that look like? Hey, we want to, does that look like more total recipients? Does it look like more campaigns? Dialing down into some of the things that email specifically can do to drive net new growth. Hey, we want to add these 2 flows, and we think this should add 10% to our total flow revenue over the next 90 days. Looking at how each process we want to collaborate with a brand to do some cross collaboration via email to help us get some new people on our list, tracking the conversion of these new subscribers into customers. Is it aligned, is it not? Understanding, was it good, was it bad? Just looking at ways that we can try and improve the email process specifically for optimizing for that total brand goal. So this was the step-by-step process that we walked through. I'm curious, Do you guys have any questions? Is there anything more that you want to go through? Is there any deeper questions you have on any part of these chapters, any of these talking points, or any of these processes down below? Let me know. I'm happy to have a discussion in the comments or take it to private message. If you do have any questions, please drop a comment down below. If this video was helpful, please drop a like and subscribe. This is a new thing for us, and we just want to make sure that we are doing as many of the right things as possible and less of the wrong stuff. And we do that by getting feedback from you guys. If you have any questions, again, feel free to reach out, and we will talk next time. Take care, guys.